Hi, fourth grade, and welcome to your science lesson. We are on page 41, and if you remember, we left off talking about ant nests, okay? So we got done talking about keeping ants and what that would look like, and ants around the world. So now we did learn a little bit about bees and beehives. If we remember, we've got honeycombs, which is how bees form their nest. We can then see in this picture here, this is what an egg looks like inside one cell. It then turns into a grub, also known as the larva. Then we can look up here and see them start to transform into actual bee shapes. And this very top one, you can even see a wing that's poking out because this bee is ready. It's ready to come out of its cell. It's fully grown. So we're actually starting here on paper nests. So let's start with social wasp. Social wasp, which were commonly called hornets, yellow jackets, or paper wasps, make paper nests. Some people think that the Chinese invented paper after observing the habitats of these amazing insects. A social wasp queen gathers wood fiber from dead trees or posts. It chews it well, and then it will form it into sheets for her paper nest. She then fills the nest with six-sided cells that she builds from the same material. In these cells, she lays her eggs, which then hatch into grubs, also known as larvae. If we take a look at this picture down here, you can see all of these white kind of like domes. Those are larvae. So they're in many stages, whether it's an egg, a larva, or it's even starting to turn into the actual insect. If you look inside of the paper, you can see the different layers of paper, which were made of wood fiber, dead trees. They chew it really well and they turn it into this paper-like structure. Then we can see over here an enlarged wasp, and it wants to know if you can find its three simple eyes on this yellow jacket. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page. On page 42 at the top, the grubs spin cocoons and later the adult wasp will come out. Do you remember what kind of metamorphosis this is? Is it complete or incomplete? Now there are more workers to gather wood fiber and build more paper walls and cells, so there will be room for the queen to lay more eggs, to raise more offspring. Those are like children. Long before man learned how to air condition houses, cars, wasps had air conditioned nests. They just stationed 2 or 3 wasps at the entrance of the hive to beat their wings at high speed to circulate the air. Some tropical wasps put small pieces of mica, which is a transparent material, in their walls as windows to admit light, which is like small windows to allow light to come in. Now let's go ahead and talk about termite mounds and tunnels. It's amazing what God's tiny insects can do when they all work together in harmony. Consider the industry of the termite. Their homes may usually be found in dry wood above ground or in moist, rotting wood underground. Never venturing into daylight, termites build their homes from the inside. Whenever possible, they tunnel their way into wooden buildings or fences, eating as they go. Wood must be so delicious to termites, and it might be as delicious as chocolate ice cream is to you. The termite cannot digest the wood alone. They must have tiny creatures inside their intestines that will help do the job for them. Some species of African termites will build waterproof mounds of nests of earth, debris, and saliva. They can be 25 to 30 feet high and as solid as rock. Here's a picture for you to see scale. So here is their mound. This is the nest. And then here is a full-grown adult, and you can see the height difference. That's very tall. Some large mounds have been used to make roads, tennis courts, and bricks. 450,000 bricks have been made from one mound. The large queen stays in her own bedroom in this termite nest where she lays up to 36,000 eggs per day for up to 50 years. The central nursery, which is where the grubs are, in these mounds is always just the right amount of moisture and temperature, whether it is in the cool of the night or the blazing African sun. One scientist wrote this about the termites. When we come to consider the order of these insects and of their subterranean cities, which are basically underground cities, they will appear foremost on the list of the wonders of the creation. Next, you'll see this comprehension check 2.10. This is the comprehension check you guys will answer on a separate sheet of paper. Now let's come down to 2.11. Let's learn about Jean-Henri Fabre. So he's an explorer of backyard wonders. So when Jean-Henri Fabre was a boy growing up in France over 150 years ago, scientists knew very little about the lives and habitats of insects. Many people had made collections of dead insects, but Fabre was the first to devote his life to observing and describing the behavior of living insects in their natural habitats. He wrote 10 books for adults describing what he saw in the fields and gardens around his home, and also delighted French school children with his famous science textbooks, which combined careful descriptions of nature with testimonies to Fabre's own faith in God, who designed and created the natural world. Jean-Henri Fabre was born in a small village in France to a poor French peasant family. Little Henry was a naturalist, meaning a person who studies nature. From his earliest childhood, keenly observing the world of grasshoppers and sparrows, snails and lizards, and always on the lookout for beetles and water weeds and bits of fossils. In the icy winter, he and his family had to live in the barn to keep warm by the heat of the animals and of the decaying dung and hay. In the hot summer, it was Henry's job to drive the ducks to the pond each day, giving him time to engage in nature study along the way. His one-room, one-windowed country schoolhouse was often filled with pigs and chickens that wandered in, but the boy learned to read and write and to do arithmetic, which is math. Here, and he even began to study Latin. Henry worked his way through high school and college and then taught for many years in the French schools. His students loved him, but he was fired from one teaching job because he allowed girls to attend his scientific classes. Throughout his life, Henry Fabre spent every spare moment with the insects that he found so fascinating. He did important research on bees, wasps, beetles, and grasshoppers. Also, crickets. He discovered the importance of insects, and he discovered the instincts of insects and described them very carefully, how they behave together. Not until he was almost 80 years old, he and others recognized the importance of his scientific work. He is known as the world's greatest entomologist, which is a person who studies insects. When Henry Fabre was about 35 years old, an English naturalist named Charles Darwin published a book about evolution. Darwin said that God did not create the living world as we know it, and as the Bible says, Darwin believed that all living things developed somehow over vast ages of time. He said that invertebrates, like insects and jellyfish, slowly turned into vertebrates, like fish, lizards, and horses. He said that there were no people at first, but then some tree-dwelling monkey-like creatures with tails, hairy bodies, and pointed ears gradually developed into people. Of course, Henry Fabre knew that this was a false and silly idea. The Bible says that God created everything in the world and that he made the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground, not from a creature like a monkey. When many other people started believing Charles Darwin, Jean-Henri Fabre kept right on believing God instead. Fabre had observed the beautiful design of nature much too closely to believe that it could all just be an accident. He did not think that Darwin's hypothesis was a reasonable or sensible explanation of the wonders we see in the world around us. He declared, "I observe, I experiment, and I let the facts speak for themselves. The facts that I observe are of such a kind that they force me to dissent from, or disagree, from Darwin's theory." Although many people of Fabre's day turned away from God thinking that evolution was true, Jean-Henri Fabre, the great scientist, knew better. He testified, "Without God, I understand nothing. Without him, all is darkness. You could take my skin from me more easily than my faith in God." All right, thank you, and I'll see you later.